What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's the lawyer you know, and we are here to do a Friday live. And if you stick around with us as we continue through this live, we're going to make a little announcement at the end of it to announce something that we're doing different this year than we did last year, kind of adding something to the scheduled thing that we do every week. It's not some huge announcement, but I want to talk through it with you guys. So we're going to talk about it at the end. I want to get your opinion, get some thoughts, have you help me structure it and pick the content and how we do what we do in 2022. So we're going to talk through a couple things today. We're going to talk a lot about the Ahmaud Arbery sentencing of those three defendants that were convicted of his murder. We are also going to talk about rogue jurors potentially with the Chauvin case, Holmes case, Maxwell case, whatever you guys want to talk about with those jurors and how it's working and how everything is working with them. We'll talk about that. And then whatever else is going on in the world, if I've been following it, I'll answer your questions as well as anything about our firm, anything about me. We'll make this more of an informal ask me anything type of video as well, if you all are interested, those of you who are watching with us during this live. So to start off, let's get into the Arbery sentence. So there's some people in here that are commenting that they haven't seen what the sentence is yet, but we're going to get to that. But at first, we need to talk through what each side was arguing, what they were asking for, and then what the judge actually had as his takeaways in this trial, which I thought were really revealing at the end of the video. So we're going to get to that. But if you guys enjoyed this content, leave a like on the video so other people can come join us in the live. And make sure you subscribe to our page if you haven't already, so you can follow along and help us make some decisions for 2022 about the direction this channel is going to go, because I love getting all your input and all the subscribers' input. So if you haven't subscribed, take a second, go hit that subscribe button, and then come back to the live. So yes, the verdict is guilty in the Arbery case. Yeah, somebody's asking that in the chat. Yes, it's guilty. But we're going to talk about sentencing. And the big question in sentencing in this case was whether or not these defendants were going to get life with parole or life without parole. And then after they were going to get that life sentence, were they going to get any additional sentences or time stacked on consecutively, not concurrently? Concurrently would mean it would run at the same time as the life sentence. Consecutively would mean a life sentence plus 20 years or whatever the judge decides. So those are some of the big questions. And the difference between life with parole and life without parole is if you get life with parole, then you have the opportunity to get out of prison. You don't have to die in prison. Some states have parole, some states don't. Florida, where I'm at, doesn't have parole. Georgia does. So when you look at life with parole versus life without parole, in order to get life without parole, there have to be aggravating circumstances. It's reserved for the worst of the worst, the most heinous crimes, the worst offenders. If you get life with parole, it kind of goes to the fact that our prison system is at least supposed to have some form of rehabilitation to it. And the defense attorneys in this case argued that in order to give some mechanism of rehabilitation, there has to be some opportunity for parole. So when we got to what the state was arguing and asking for each defendant, because as we know, the McMichaels were convicted under a little bit different facts and circumstances than Mr. Bryan. And theirs was worse, especially Travis McMichael, who was the gunman who did pull the trigger. So when the state was arguing and presenting evidence during sentencing for the judge's consideration, they argued that the McMichael boys should get life without parole, meaning die in prison, and that Mr. Bryan should get life with parole. One other key difference in that is if you get life with parole, you don't have an opportunity to get before the parole board until 30 years into your sentence. And that is a relatively new law, we'll call it, in Georgia, because if your crimes you committed, no matter when you were convicted, but if the actual crimes were committed prior to July 1st of 2006, then you would have gotten in front of that parole board after 14 years. And I believe if it was before 1995, it was only 7 years into your life sentence that you could get before a parole board. And the point was, if you've shown to rehabilitate yourself, you can get out. And there's a board there to determine whether or not you've done that, whether or not you've showed remorse, whether you're going to be a contributing member of society, things like that. So now it's 30 years. So it was 7, then it was 14, now it's 30 years. So even if they would have gotten life with parole, they're still going to be in there 30 years, which for the elder McMichael wasn't going to do anything. That's a death sentence anyway. So some of this was just surface level, what it looks like and what people are going to be talking about afterwards, because there might not have been a big difference between life with parole and life without parole for some of these defendants. Nevertheless, prosecutor was asking for life with parole for Brian and without parole for the McMichaels. And the aggravating factors that the state attorney gave in this case was they were former military, Coast Guard, and former law enforcement. So they should have known better, and they knew what was going to happen to them. Thank you, Kay. So that was an aggravating circumstance, which is interesting because usually that's a mitigating circumstance if somebody's dedicated their life to law enforcement, public service, military. That's a mitigating circumstance usually, but she twisted it smartly and used it as an aggravating circumstance. They armed themselves and were looking for a fight. Vigilantism, she mentioned throughout, and how we have to punish and keep people from being vigilantes and taking the law into their own hands. Hate and evil in their heart and eyes. We heard from the family members of Ahmaud Arbery, who also asked for the maximum for life without parole for all of the defendants. So that was an aggravating circumstances, and that they showed no remorse. So those were the aggravating circumstances. And I think if you stick with me here and we discuss this, because I want to get all of your opinions, I'm going to have some unpopular opinions in this video. And I'm going to understand people disagree with me, but that's one of the parts, one of the best mechanisms for learning is if we disagree and talk through it. So that's what the state was asking for. The defense came up, made some arguments. They're good people. Oh, the state did have a quote that said, 99 good acts don't erase the one bad act when you take a life. And when I heard that, I cringed a little bit, because that's not an argument for sentencing, in my opinion. That's an argument for the case to the jury, that just because they were a good person, if they come murder somebody, you have to convict. But the state used it in sentencing. And the defense came up and flipped that theme, which I thought did a good job, the defense for Travis McMichael, and said, the 99 acts do, the 99 good acts in a life well lived does make a difference in sentencing. So while it may not make a difference in the verdict, if you have 99 good acts and your whole life you've been doing good things, and then you commit a heinous crime, you get convicted of that crime and you serve your sentence, but those 99 good acts should make a difference in sentencing. So that was kind of the defense's argument. And then Roddy Bryan's attorney came and made some argument about an exception that he could get life with parole, but instead of serving the 30 minimum years, he would have an opportunity to go before the parole board whenever they wanted to, however soon it would be, because his crimes weren't as heinous and he was kind of on a different level than the McMichaels. The state came up and said that doesn't apply to this case because he's not technically a first offender because of the crimes he was convicted of. The judge ultimately, in reading the sentencing, said he agreed with the state that that exception does not apply to Roddy Bryan. So what did the judge determine was their sentence in this case? And I'll just comment real quick on the judge. I felt like the judge has been awesome in this case. It seems like he's really thoughtful, smart, has followed along, has paid attention. And I thought he's been fair. I thought he's been stern. I thought he's kept it on the train on the tracks, for lack of a better term. And I feel like he's done a good job throughout this case. So the judge first starts out by giving his thoughts on the case. He accepted the verdict, he said, and he spent a lot of time thinking about this. And he wants to give an appropriate sentence based on the evidence and the facts in this case. He does not want to give a sentence that's influenced by outside forces or the notoriety of the case or anything else. He wants to just give a verdict that's fair for the facts and everything that came out in the case, which I was happy to hear, because that's exactly how I think he should give the verdict. And I think that's how every judge should, not the verdict, sorry, the sentence. And that's how every judge should give the sentence, is based on this, not what we hear in the media like we've talked about in all these cases. And he did this thing I didn't love, though, and he even said it might be a little theatric, but we're going to sit here silent for 1 minute so you can feel this is just a fraction of the time Ahmaud Arbery was running from them. And we sat there silent for a minute. It didn't have an effect on me, but maybe it had an effect on the other people because there was nothing that happened for 1 minute. I think he was running for about 5 minutes from them. So it's kind of lost on me. But when he started talking about the defendants, so beforehand, I'll just, I don't know how I want to do this as far as outline, but I'll go ahead and just let the cat out of the bag. I felt like an appropriate sentence in this case, if I was the judge, based on everything that happened, would have been life with parole for all three of them. And I know that's an unpopular opinion. I know most people agree with, if we did a poll, I'll look at it after, but overwhelming majority of people agreed with the verdict and agreed with the judge, life without parole for the McMichaels and life with parole with Brian. So the judge reads the verdict, life without parole for Travis McMichael, plus 20 years consecutive. So life plus 20. For Greg McMichael, life without parole plus 10 years. So life plus 10. There was some concurrent sentences that don't really matter. And then for Roddy Bryan, life with parole, 10 years, but that sentence was suspended. So basically just life with parole. He wasn't going to have to serve those extra 10 years. So he dropped the hammer on them. And the reason for that, when he actually started talking about the defendants, because I texted somebody that asked me earlier in the day, and I said, once he started talking about Travis McMichael, I knew it was over for him. He's getting life without parole, because the judge basically rolled his eyes and didn't believe what Travis McMichael said on the stand, that he was in shock, that he didn't understand what was happening. Yet, if you look at the quotes and watch the video and watch what they did after Ahmaud Arbery's body was on the ground, they showed no remorse. They showed their intent. They showed they were not in shock. They showed they were not in fear. They showed they were not making a citizen's arrest, and he basically did not buy what they were selling. He also read some quotes for Greg McMichael that were damning, showing he did not feel that these defendants deserved anything less than the maximum penalty of life without parole. Then when he got to Roddy, he did say things were a little bit different. Now, he didn't necessarily believe Roddy didn't know what was going on. And he said, at the end of the day, you did use a deadly weapon, meaning your truck, to stop Ahmaud Arbery. And but for you impeding his lane of travel, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Therefore, you get life with parole. The arguments made by the defendants were that they couldn't show remorse because there were still these federal hate crime charges, and they can't do anything to hinder their defense in that case. And while the judge said, I respect that, I understand that, you can get remorse by action. You can get remorse by, remorse is felt and demonstrated. And on the video and throughout the trial, he doesn't feel like remorse was felt or demonstrated by these defendants, which I thought was damning. And I think the judge showed that he felt like this was basically an execution. They knew what they were doing. They wanted to do it. And they went and executed their plan to murder Ahmaud Arbery. Now, a couple things I disagree with, okay? And this is where we get to unpopular opinion. I wish that we could all agree this was murder. We can all agree this was heinous. We can all agree it was the right and just verdict. But to act like, or to say in open court and on the record that we know for sure Ahmaud Arbery was doing what he loved, going for a jog, running. I didn't feel like there was enough evidence to prove that's actually what was happening. Now, was he doing something that deserved him being murdered in the street? Absolutely not. Did he do something worthy of being chased down and hunted? Absolutely not. So what they did and their actions are deplorable, and they got what they deserved, life in prison. But when we talk about the maximum penalty for cases like this, there has to be a difference for people in Georgia that rape and dismember and murder minors and elderly and handicapped people, for people that drop bombs on buildings, for people that murder, go shoot up schools and churches, life without parole for the most deplorable of the most deplorable and the most evil acts that there are. And the defense attorney for Travis McMichael, I think, did a good job of arguing that there's a reason that the law is the way that it is, because murder is murder and it's horrible. These people need to be punished. They need to be punished severely, and none of us are going to disagree with that. But if you're going to allow certain convicted murderers of getting life with parole, then we have to try to determine what scenarios that might exist for. And to me, when you have former law enforcement, former military veterans with no prior convictions, with families, contributing members of society for all accounts and purposes, I'm not saying they were good men, because I don't know them and I don't know if that was proven, but when we look at their record and what they did over their life, I do think that has to matter. I do think, even as the prosecutor said, 99 good acts have to matter, even if the one bad act is much more important and is going to get you life in prison. So I think that life with parole, 30 years, Greg McMichael is still going to die in prison. Okay. So, I mean, it's not like I'm saying he should get out at all. But I just feel like if life without parole is reserved for the worst of the worst, and we need to balance the aggravating factors and the mitigating factors, that he didn't pull the trigger, that he was absolutely guilty of murder. He was involved in it. He was aiding and abetting. He was an accessory. All that including, absolutely. I agreed with this verdict from day one. But I feel like someone who did what he did deserves life without parole. Just me personally, I'm not the judge on the case, and what the judge said is what it is. And then Travis McMichael, I can understand life without parole. He was the trigger man. He did it. The things that he said and shouted and how he acted, I'm okay with life without parole from him. I just probably would have given him life with parole, again, for what I said. I think that if we can rehabilitate people, we should try. I'll always be in favor of that. And I think 30 years in a state prison, and then he goes before the parole board. It's not like he gets out after 30 years. He has to convince them he's a changed man, show remorse, and then he could have another 20 years on the other charges. And I'm okay with that, because he was convicted of multiple things. And then even federal crimes, he could have the charges and the sentences after that. So he could still theoretically be in prison for the rest of his life. That's just how I'm looking at it. I realize most people are going to disagree with me, and I'm happy to talk about it, and tell me why you think it should be life without parole, and why you think maybe potentially you think the law should change, and every murder convict, everybody who's convicted of any murder, should get life without parole. And if that's what you think, let me know. And we're happy to talk about it. The judge also said the sentences and the convictions can be appealed within 30 days. So we have a month basically to see that. Their federal trial, I think, starts next month in February. So they have about this time basically to continue forward with their appeals, which I'm sure we're going to have. The judge also said they hunted down and shot Ahmaud Arbery, which I agree with, and I understand why the judge gave the sentence that he gave. Now, something interesting. The state asked for an additional term after the judge sentenced them. She asked that they would not be allowed to profit off of this case or their likeness or anything to do with this case, book deals, movie deals, social media deals. And if they did profit, that it would go to a fund for Ahmaud Arbery. And I think actually it was like a charity to help people like Ahmaud Arbery, not to his family necessarily. I can't remember exactly how she worded it, but basically she wanted to make sure they couldn't profit off of this. Very interesting in today's day and age to do things like this, because some criminal convicts have made money off books and movie deals. But the judge said, is there a statute on point? They ended up basically ruling on whether or not that's going to be the case. What was interesting as well is the lawyer, Roddy Bryan's lawyer, said, Judge, I'm not saying he's going to make a book or movie out of this, but he is getting donations basically to pay for his defense, and I don't want this sentence to affect his ability to pay for a defense. Basically fund me, Judge, to pay me, because some people, I guess, are donating. And so that's going to be interesting in how all that comes out. And we will actually talk more about that if you guys are interested, and we can talk about it. Let's see here. One other point the defense attorney made for Travis McMichael, that 4 minutes of his life should not overtake and overshadow his entire life as part of the mitigating factors, which, I kind of agree with. And again, none of this is saying they're not guilty or they should go home or they should get a slap on the wrist. I'm just saying life with parole, which could turn into life and they die in prison, or it could turn into 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. It's not a slap on the wrist. Just want to reiterate that because I'm sure I'm going to get, I can't believe you'd go this easy on these murders. Okay. So those are my comments on the sentencing. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Then we can get to the juror misconduct if you are interested in that. Yes, thank you, Sylvia. As always, I'm trying to touch my screen here. Smash the like button. Thank you. All right, let's get to the questions here. And we'll talk through the Ahmaud Arbery case, and you all can disagree with me, as I'm sure you will. New Chris, what elements of this trial do you think the federal prosecutors will try to admit it into evidence in the upcoming trial? For example, the racist epithet Travis called Ahmaud after the killing. So they'll actually have a broader discretion to use the racial slurs used because it's a hate crime in federal court. The gun weapons charges in federal court and those enhancements, still false imprisonment and depriving people of civil rights. There'll be a lot of similarities. But the number one thing they're going to take from this trial and use in federal court that they might not have had in this trial, obviously, is Travis McMichael's statements himself. So while they did hear them in this trial and they were able to cross-examine him, they didn't have any additional, well, they did have additional statements made by law enforcement. They didn't have a statement like this that he made under oath that they could use to impeach him. And now the feds will have that statement. So that is something that could be different in the federal trials. We could hear some impeachment if he changes his testimony at all, if he testifies in the federal trial, if the federal trial goes with, the surge and COVID positives, or if the federal trial goes because there could be a plea deal between now and then based on these sentences. But who the heck knows? There's a lot of stuff still up in the air. But I think there's going to be a lot of what happened in this trial that the feds are going to use. Obviously, at work, they got convicted here. And I think it just makes it all the more likely that we're going to get convictions in the federal case. All right, I'm scrolling up here. Let's go through some of the comments and questions. Hello, everybody. Teresa Miles, totally agree with the judge's decision. Most chilling was the 1 minute of silence. See, some people that hits home with them. To me, it didn't really. Let's see. Kawa, I still don't understand how the man who didn't shoot anybody, didn't have a gun, and cooperated with police since day one is now a convicted murderer. Not fair. This will show you that cooperating with police is not all it's cracked up to be. You should cooperate with law enforcement via your lawyer, which he may have, but I think parts of the process he was going on his own unrepresented, which they will always use against you and turn you into the criminal. But he used a deadly weapon in his car. He was there. He blocked him in. And the judge even said, because he blocked him in, maybe if he didn't do that, none of this would have happened. And he did get a lighter sentence of life with parole. But I agree. I mean, I think if anybody was going to get a lighter charge, maybe Roddy, but because he was an accessory to the murder, boom, he falls in with them. Rachel really liked the judge, seemed fair and balanced. I agree. Roddy played a pivotal part in the crime. Correct, and that's what the judge said. They really showed no remorse. That was Rex, and a lot of people agreed with that, and that was one of the aggravating factors. Patty also agreed. Judge was fair and just. Felt like Roddy felt bad about what happened. The judge even said that he was the only one that really seemed shocked and didn't understand what happened and how it got the way that it did. Lisa, Travis McMichael saved the kid's life once as a lifeguard, saved other people's lives in the military. A lot of veterans have done that. And again, doesn't make him not guilty of murder. Absolutely not. He is still guilty of murder, even if he saved the kid's life, even if he was a veteran, even if he was a law enforcement officer, even if he was a great guy. He's still guilty of murder. He still is going to get life in prison. It's just whether or not it's with or without parole. And I think things like saving people's lives should be taken under consideration than lifelong criminals or people who are just bad people throughout their life. They should not get the benefit of the doubt, if you want to call it that, or the mitigating sentence. but other people I think should. I think that's why it's in the law. If it wasn't there, if the legislature intended and our country intended for everybody to be punished the same way if you're convicted of murder, then they wouldn't have two separate potential sentences in this case. Rex, okay, I guess that's a good act. Thumbs down from Chris Brown. I assume that's disagreement of what I said. Most people would have more sympathy for Roddy. I think that's true. Roddy was not armed, Lisa. What's fair for Ahmaud losing his life? That all these guys get life in prison, that they're all convicted murderers, they're all convicted felons. I mean, Roddy, again, we can talk about that, but at least the McMichaels for sure, convicted murderers, convicted felons, life in prison. I think that's, I mean, nothing's fair, obviously, right? Nothing's fair. Nothing's worth his life. Nothing's going to bring him back. Nothing's going to make it okay. We just have to look at the law and see what the just punishment is after the fact and do the best that we can. Maddie agrees that all of them should be eligible for parole. Probably supposed to be the worst of version repeat offenders. One bad act in a lifetime. This is politics. So he or she thinks politics is a part of it. Carrie has not 1 ounce of pity for any of them. They murdered a person in cold blood. Yeah, I agree, Rex. I think, and that's the one I'm thinking I would be okay if Travis did, even though I probably would have said life with parole, and potentially he never gets out of prison. But I can understand him getting life without parole. He was the one that pulled the trigger. It's hard for me. So think about this, and this is something I was talking about earlier. Maybe you guys disagree with me, but I went to Florida State, big fraternity school, and even in high school, saw a lot of fights. A lot of guys coming around, circling around, not letting the person out, 2 groups of friends while 2 people were fighting. A lot of people cheering people on in the fight and instigating the fight, wanting to see a fight. So if one of those goes bad or somebody picks up a stick or a rock and hits somebody in the head and they're dead, are all of those people that are there going to prison for the rest of their life without parole? Now, are they all wrong? Yes, at different levels. Should the person that picked up the rock and killed somebody get a very serious punishment? Absolutely. But if they're a perfect student, ROTC, straight A's, should they go to prison for life without parole? Should they get the same crime as somebody who goes in and shoots up a elementary school and then posts about how amazing it is online afterwards, and then does other stuff after, lights something on fire, whatever, the worst of the worst? Should this all just be taken the same? I don't think so. I think we need to have discretion to a certain point. I don't think any of them should get 5 years in prison or anything like that. I don't think discretion should roll that far. But I do think there should be discretion up to a certain point, and I think the life with or without parole is enough discretion, just one man's opinion. Agree, Patty. Life with or without parole is no difference to Greg. But again, that's not what I'm taking into consideration. I'm not taking whether or not it makes a practical difference. I'm just saying what I think is fair. Lisa, the McMichaels deserved, I don't know why it's not clicking, life, not so much Roddy. Venti, I generally don't like life without parole. So what's your point? I'm not sure. I've got a lot of points. Be more specific. Don't even think Roddy should have been charged with anything, QS said. So, Rex, it's rare to see this little remorse. The judge was clear. McMichael's against showing remorse. I disagree with you. Been involved in a lot of these cases, seen a lot of defendants. If there are outstanding charges, and if you go to trial and you don't think you did anything wrong, I mean, I don't know if they didn't say that they didn't do anything wrong, but if you go to trial, you're fighting the charges, and then you have future charges, it's actually not abnormal to have the defendants not show remorse. So Derek Chauvin, in his sentencing, he did look to the family and basically say he showed some remorse without actually saying it, and reference the fact that he had future charges, and that's why he couldn't actually say sorry as part of his sentencing. So it's not that abnormal to not see them say, I'm sorry for what happened. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for your loss. Now, a lot of times that can have an effect on the sentence, but to them, they've also got to weigh whether it's worth it to come out and hinder future charges for the difference between life with parole and life without parole when they know they're appealing these charges. So there is some just practicality to how they handle the sentencing hearing and things like that. The record doesn't matter. Sharice Williams says that's just not true. Legally speaking, the record does matter. Their criminal record absolutely matters. And that's why we write the laws these way, that there are aggravating factors and mitigating factors in someone's criminal record is one of those factors. So, I mean, it does matter. It does matter. And we can't disregard the law. Great discussion here, Peter. Thank you, Eric. It doesn't seem like everybody agrees with that, but so Sharice, I have a question for you. Sharice Williams. It doesn't matter if a person's a doctor saving lives, then goes and kills someone. So let's give two scenarios. If there's a doctor who's been saving lives their whole life, has a road rage incident, somebody cuts them off, they get crazy angry or they're drunk or whatever, they pull a gun and shoot the person, murder. And then you have a convicted pedophile, convicted felon who's not supposed to have a gun, no license, just left doing one crime, gets road rage, gets out of the car, shoots the person in the head. You think they should have the same sentences. And if you do, that's your prerogative. And if the legislature agreed with that, they would just put that across the board. But I want to know, do you think those two people deserve the same exact sentence for that crime? Because it's the same crime. It doesn't negate the fact they should be sentenced to the full extent of the law. So everybody that's convicted should be sentenced to the full extent of the law. Because we just had a case in Colorado with a 110-year sentence, and the governor came like that and dropped it to 10 years. So that's just not the case, that everybody is always sentenced to the full extent of the law. Nicholas, yes. Travis, again, I can understand Travis getting life without parole because he did pull the trigger. Right. I agree. All hail King Rose. I don't care if he was a jogger, committed trespassing, even committed burglary and then left. You can't go kill somebody in the streets like this. You just can't. Chris Brown, I hear you, but not fair. I get it. Judge didn't agree with me either. So, I mean, again, you guys are on the right side on this one, obviously. All right. So we're getting into some rehabilitation thoughts. Hate can't be rehabilitated. Some may agree or disagree. I would hope to think anything could be rehabilitated. Okay, so that Regnar said voted some. This is why I voted somewhat. Here we go. This is a great point. I kind of saw this while I was talking to Omnipotent Lemure. I believe in rehabilitating criminals, but I don't believe the prison system has that well figured out. 1000%. I agree with you. This is something we've been talking about in the legal field, is how do we make it more rehabilitative? Because honestly, it almost just makes people worse when they go in there, when they come out. So I 100% agree with you. So I'm being kind of optimistic and trying to be optimistic about a situation being able to be rehabilitated, when in reality, there's really no evidence to show that it is that rehabilitated. You must be a public offender lawyer. I have no idea what a public offender is. I'm not a public defender lawyer, if that's what you're asking. Thank you. Sylvia, hit the like button if you haven't already. Rex, again, the prison system being a nightmare and failing to rehabilitate people is different, important discussion. I agree. 100%. It's a different discussion, but Carrie Adams, they shouldn't profit from it. I think everybody agrees with that. Right? If prison actually rehabilitated them, that'd be great. Absolutely, Rex. Another good point. If Americans would stop treating the horrible conditions in prison as a joke and laughing about it. When I mentioned it on the Ghislaine Maxwell case, a lot of people were saying, good, she deserves that, and laughing about it. Then a lot of people were saying, that's horrible for anybody. We shouldn't treat anybody like that. We definitely need prison reform. Absolutely agree. Okay, Chris Brown, I agree. Not all murderers deserve life sentences. Travis Michael is just not one of them. Meaning, I think Chris is saying he thinks he is one that does deserve murder, and that's great, and that's fine if you think that. But I think the point is we need to think through it, and we need to decide as a society, and the legislature has decided whether or not they all need to be treated the same, or if they need to be treated differently. And if they are treated differently, we need to go through that analysis in our head, apply the facts to the law, and make that decision. It seems like you have, and so I can respect it. Okay, Lucky, we will get to the jury misconduct as soon as I finish these questions on Arbery. We'll give it about 2 or 3 more minutes. Why don't we do this? Get your questions in now about the juror misconduct, because I've already done video. Me and Pete have done videos on the juror misconduct already to get our thoughts. So get your questions in now about the juror misconduct. They'll come up at the bottom of the chat. As soon as I'm done with these Arbery questions, we'll transition right into the juror misconduct questions. All hail King Rose. I'm not sure if this was directed at me. Even if he was not a jogger, are you implying that he should have been murdered? Absolutely not. I think you're replying to somebody else. Yeah, the point is it doesn't matter what he was doing. At that point, he's in the street, not hurting anybody, trying to run away and retreat. Let him run away and retreat, call the cops, give him a description, let the cops do their job. Maddie, yes. They are punished the same as lifelong criminals who've committed 20 murders. Murder is irreversible, Brianna. I agree. But I want to hear some questions or some answers to my question there. Kyle P., the federal case that's going in February does carry with it hate crime consideration. Maria, none of them had any prior convictions ever. They were all first offenders. Chris Brown, not going to lie, it's a great point. I'm sure I'm behind in the chat, but I like to hear that. I love the progression as you're thinking through it, which I appreciate. And these are the kind of viewers and listeners I like. I don't care if they disagree with me. That's great. But let's process it, think about it, talk about it together. I don't think anybody's saying no time. So this is the problem. We cannot get into hyperbole. We can't exaggerate. We can't embellish. I don't know if you're responding to somebody else, but at no point did I say somebody should get no time. But if you don't have a criminal record, I think potentially maybe you don't get the absolute maximum sentence you're looking at. That's all I'm saying. Absolutely, they deserve time. Life with parole is a long time, potentially life. Sylvia saying Roddy was definitely in on this. No right to hunt him down and shoot him in cold blood, Brianna. Absolutely 1000%. Oh, Maria thinks that all judges during sentencing should be prevented from expressing their personal opinion. Most people disagree with you. A lot of people love getting the judge's opinion of the case because they sit up there and are, just cool, calm, collected, and they try not to give off where they're leaning. But in sentencing, you can kind of hear where they're leaning. I think, Brianna, no one takes into account the horror Ahmaud Arbery experienced in those final minutes. I think that they did. And I think that's why they were convicted of murder, and that's why they're going to spend their life in prison. So I do think some people did, maybe not everybody. Because you can't imagine it, honestly. You just can't imagine it. It's the worst thing you could ever think. All these guys with guns and trucks chasing you down in the street. Yeah, I can't imagine much worse. Thank you, Hey KB. Glad you found it as well. Take a second, subscribe, like the video, come back for more. Some people saying, yeah, okay, maybe I agree. Maybe not for Greg, maybe not for Roddy, but most people think Travis should have gotten life without parole. Virginia, who jury misconduct in Maxwell? Yes, so a juror came out and basically said he doesn't remember because he flew through the questionnaire whether or not he admitted to having sexual abuse in his past, but that he was able to use his experience to convince the jurors that doubted the victim's testimony in the Maxwell trial. He was able to convince them that what the victim said was true and to disregard the defense's memory expert. And he was able to get them basically over to the convicting side. And so that's how they got the conviction. And if you lie on a jury questionnaire, even if it's accidental, and then it doesn't give the lawyers the opportunity to question the jurors, then it could potentially be a cause for new trial. So no, Starry Z, we do not know with 100% certainty what these jurors' answers were on the questionnaire. I assume we will eventually on that case. Carrie Adams, hard to believe no repercussions for the rogue jurors. Yeah, I agree. And I believe the main juror in question in the Maxwell case has lawyered up. So I think there may be some repercussions coming. What implications does the juror misconduct have on the rest of the case? None, really. It's just if there's a new trial, it's a new trial. They're not going to bring up the fact that there was a rogue juror in the prior trial in the new trial. Correct. There's not going to be any appeals for the not guilty counts for Holmes. So New Chris buys the prosecutor's argument. So this is exactly the argument the prosecutor made in the Arbery sentencing. Prior military and law enforcement shouldn't be a mitigating factor, meaning a lessening sentence factor. It should be an aggravating factor because they should have known better. And they knew what was going to result when you chase somebody with guns. So he's summarizing her argument, basically. David Tran, how often do jurists reevaluate sentencing guidelines and update, modify them to fit present circumstances? All the time, but it's a lot more difficult than you think. To change any rule or law is very difficult. I mean, I think it's since 1995, this life with and without parole minimum has changed 3 times. It was 7, then 14, then 30 years. Rachel Mills, what do you think about the black pastor's comments? Will they include that in the appeals? They're probably going to try to include the outside forces. I don't think they're going to get anywhere with that. Do you think a jury could be compromised or corrupt? Absolutely. And this juror misconduct stuff in these cases is literally a trial lawyer's worst nightmare. I was with a couple trial lawyers last week, and we were kind of just talking about this. And it's literally what keeps us up at night and gives us cold sweats that we put all this time, money, energy, and effort into presenting this case and just getting a fair jury, that when you have a jury that gives you no chance and convinces other people otherwise and disregards your client's rights, and then a conviction happens or you lose a civil case, it is brutal. It's the worst. I mean, we don't have to have people that are biased towards us. We just want people with a clean slate that are going to listen to what happened, and whatever they decide, we live with it as lawyers. But we just want it to be a fair jury. Grumpy Cat, should the juror on the Maxwell trial questionnaire be prosecuted if he lied? I don't necessarily think he should be prosecuted because that's going to make people want to be jurors even less. And we already have a problem with that in our country if it was a mistake. I think if he did it on purpose and he lied on purpose and then went in there with a mission to be a rogue juror and change and affect this outcome, then absolutely he should be prosecuted. But if it was accidental or a mistake or he flew through it or didn't read the question right, then no, I don't think he should be prosecuted. All right, let's see. Kara, life without parole should be for the most depraved murders, those who torture, rape, etc. Okay, so this is good question. Virginia, why bother with the federal case? You only have one life, a waste of money and time. But I think the hate crime portion of it, people want to see that prosecuted, want to see conviction there. I think there's a chance he also pleads like Chauvin did. Also, if they appeal and win the state case, then you have the federal case as kind of the backup. So there's some reasons for it. All right, let's see here. All right, any other questions here about the juror misconduct? Brittany D. Roddy cut off Ahmaud's escape route, so he should have gotten the max. Oof. That's brutal. That's brutal. He didn't have a gun. There's nothing to indicate he was in there with a plan to shoot him. He didn't know what happened afterwards. Again, convicted of crime, absolutely. Prison time, absolutely. But the max, don't agree there. Kyle P. So if it goes to retrial, how would the voir dire process be adjusted to prevent that from happening a second time? So maybe surprising to you, but we know as lawyers this happens. And we have adjusted the voir dire system in order to prevent this from happening. That's why I like trying cases in state court more than federal court for civil cases, because you're allowed to talk a lot more with the jurors, dig in, discuss with them, even if they're lying or withholding some. You can get a feel the more you talk to them. In federal court, some judges don't let you ask questions at all. Some really limit the questions you can ask. So, I think just let the lawyers ask more questions, personally. I think that's how we avoid this. But letting a juror sit there the entire time and never hearing from them, never having them answer a question is scary. And we're always scared of the jurors that don't say anything and just check no to everything on the questionnaire, because sometimes that's how it happens. They don't fill anything out. They just check no everywhere. And you're like, seriously? You don't know any law enforcement officers, anybody that's been victims, anybody that's been a criminal in the past? Nothing? You're just a blank slate? It's hard. See, I don't know about Holmes. I'm not positive that's going to be a mistrial. I think it may. And I think Pete thinks that there's a good chance going to be a mistrial. I feel much more confident about the Maxwell jurors creating a mistrial. Virginia, thank you. Love what you're doing here. Let's talk a little bit about the Maxwell juror. The Maxwell juror to me seems more like the situation that I fear the most, where somebody who has a bias in a case and is just not the right juror for this case forces their way on by not answering the questions appropriately, and then not giving the lawyers opportunity to question them, not giving the lawyers and the judge an opportunity to say, should this person be struck for cause? That to me is it's an impossible thing to overcome, in my opinion. Oh yeah, Brianna, his involvement was too high for an acquittal. I don't disagree there. I think he was involved enough to get convicted of some of these crimes, but life in prison, I don't think his involvement was enough for that, personally. All right, so while we get more questions about the rogue jurors, get them in there now. Questions about the Ahmaud Arbery sentencing, get them in there now. I'm going to give my little announcement I referenced in the beginning and ask for your help, okay? My people here with me, a lot of you have been here with me from the beginning, from the Ronnie O'Neill case, from the Chauvin stuff, from just our legal videos that we did, and then the Holmes case, et cetera, R. Kelly. But here's our announcement. So for 2022, we hit 25,000 subscribers last year. We want to hit bigger numbers this year, maybe 50,000, maybe 100,000 subscribers. We'll see how we can work for that together. Subscribing helps. Liking the videos help. You guys do everything you can to help, which I appreciate. Commenting the questions. You guys bring awesome content for me here on this channel. But in 2022, we are going with a weekly live. So people have been asking to do more lives, get more Q&As. So we're going to do a weekly live Friday afternoons. I think 4 o'clock. We may play with the timing a little bit to see what works best. But we're going to try for Friday afternoons around 4 o'clock to do a live for about an hour. Answer all your questions. We can do some personal Q&As as well. I'm going to bring in and feature other lawyers in my firm. So we're going to make it fun. It's going to be a good time. You guys are going to enjoy it, I hope. But we need some help. Let me know if you think that's something you'd be interested in. If you want to hear this Q&A personally, if you want to talk about the cases we're doing, if you want to have the opportunity to just ask questions and get answers, because we're still full-time lawyers, so we can't do lives all the time every day. We're doing static videos when we have time to kind of squeeze them in. But not only do we need your help with that and help with the content, if you guys have helped with from the beginning on giving us the content that's most interesting to you, but We also want you to help us think of a name for this live. Whatever you think, throw suggestions out. We're going to compile some of the suggestions. The best one we've gotten so far is Off the Docket with the lawyer you know. We've also gotten people thought to bring back the podcast name Peter's Proffer, and offer of proof that I can just kind of use that as the title. Courtroom conversations. There's been a lot of suggestions thrown out already. So make sure you get what you think the title should be. And if somebody suggests the title, we're going to do our best to try to keep a list of who does it. Maybe we'll throw a gift card your way if your suggestion makes it to the win. I'm sure there's going to be multiple people suggesting multiple titles. So if you are one of the people to suggest the winning title, we'll send a gift card your way. So get in the comments. Let me know what you all think. And we'll pick a title for this. We'll have some fun with it. And we're going to try to do it every week throughout the year. There are going to be some weeks I'm in trial or in depots that maybe I can't do it. Maybe another lawyer will cover it, or we'll just kick it to the next week. But I'm going to do it as often as possible, hopefully weekly, if it's something you all want. So let me know if it's something you want, and we'll try to make it happen. So yeah, we're already getting some stuff. Law Live, call it In Motion. I like that one. Blind Mother F. Absolutely. Friday Happy Hour. I like it. Can the governor change this verdict? Yes, the governor can commute the sentence. Yes. Eric McDowell asked Peter. R. Thomas likes Off the Docket. So yeah, bring them in. Let me know what your suggestions are. Yes, AZ, thank you. Hit the like button on this video. We're going to have fun this year. I can't believe it's grown to 25,000. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, and we're going to continue doing it. Going to continue doing it while still being a full-time, real trial lawyer, being in the trenches, so I can bring you what the judges are doing, what the prosecutors are doing, what the defense lawyers are doing, what's happening in civil cases, how we handle this stuff, how the law is changing, be up on it, be writing the laws, changing the laws, being involved in the process, because I think that gives you the best grasp on what's happening. Not just reacting to it or talking about it, but living in it. And that's what our firm is doing. We are living in it. All right, let's see here if we have any more questions before we sign off. We've got 2 or 3 minutes here before we sign off. Thank you, JH. Thank you for answering the question. Donate once you figure out how. Appreciate the knowledge. Absolutely happy to do it. Thank you, Carrie. Rachel Mills, I haven't seen when R. Kelly is sentenced, but we will absolutely be doing a video on it. Thank you, Brittany D. Love the channel. Appreciate the team's hard work. Yes, I saw that going on today. I didn't have a chance to catch the Supreme Court arguments on the vaccine mandate, but I heard it was presented today. McDowell would like the weekly live. Let's see what else. Thank you, David. Pleading out, not bad, not bad. Think it could make it on the voting list here. Live is always great. Rita gives us a chance to ask questions. Roundtable talk, that's good. Franco and some other comments about if Arbery was white, this all would never happen. I think that's what he's saying. There's some typos in here. Sorry, Franco, if I'm not getting the point across that you are trying to put across. Definitely not the hate crimes. And I think the judge and a lot of people in the media and stuff agree with you that they don't think it would happen this way if he was white. Let's see what else we have here. Law trenches. What happens if a lawyer gets called to jury duty? There have been some lawyers that have been on juries. We've actually had a lawyer on a 4 or 5 week federal criminal trial, one of my first trials with my dad. It was crazy. We had a lawyer on the trial. He was not happy about being on the trial. He ended up having to be excused for a different reason. So he didn't stay on the trial the whole time. I've only been called to jury duty one time. They knew who I was, so they released me basically. Everybody in all the criminal courthouse here knows our last name, Tragos. 99% of the reason is because of my dad. He was a king in all those courtrooms and still is. And in the civil cases, they usually don't want me because I primarily do plaintiff's work on the civil side. Mike McCormick wants a prize. Okay, well, we're on our way. Maybe he'll get one. All right, let's see. Of the 207 people in here, only 109 have hit the like button. Hey, it's easy to do. Hit the like button. It helps. Appreciate it. Above the Bar, Legal Legends, Case by Case. I like Case by Case, Brittany. I do like that one. A lot of people like stuff like inextricably intertwined in legal terms that are always used. That case by case basis is one of those that I always like. Carrie, thank you for joining us live from the bench. We'd actually be from the bar. So we have a bench and bar conference. The bench is the judges, the bar are the lawyers. So maybe from the bar. Brianna CC, I was not ripping on him for the typos. I was just saying I don't want to put words in people's mouths because of typos. So Bennett Wolf, my law clerk, just asked me this today. Do you agree with felony murder rule? I hate the felony murder rule, and I do not agree with it. That's a whole other video topic that maybe we'll do sometime. I'd like to get some other lawyers on to talk through that as well. Mike McCormick thinks race was an issue. Oh, I don't think race was an issue. Okay. Thank you, Mike McCormick, for hitting the like. Oh, that's interesting. Lucia, Tragos time. That's interesting. Tragos time. Maybe we can work that in. Case by case is quite good, Mike McCormick says. All right, we're getting close to that hour. I'm going to try to keep it to an hour for the most part so you guys can know what to expect. I want to do it at the same time every week so you can try to plan to be here because I think that makes it better. We may play with the time and what works better for the most people, but make sure you guys get it in with prejudice. I like that. And bar discourse. I like these. You guys are so much better at this than I am. Trust me. I didn't come up with anything good. So you guys are giving us a lot to work with. So I appreciate that. Keep them coming. If you're watching this video later, not in the live, post in the comments the titles you would like or you think are good. Maybe we'll name it typos, Brianna. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this Friday. Have a great weekend. More stuff's going to be popping off next week, I'm sure, so we're going to do more videos. But always get into the community page. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Tragos Law. That's my last name. And let's have some fun this year. 2022 is going to be a big year for the channel, hopefully. Thank you so much for joining us. That's all we got for today.